Okay, welcome everyone. I am Lori Peterson with PSS Life University, and we are going to be starting in a few moments. You are in the PSS Retirement Readiness Base Camp, Class 1, and we're thrilled to have you here. The program is going to be continuing in November. We have 2 classes lined up, one on November 3rd, How Much Do I Need? And on November 17th, Living Trusts. And I'll be putting that information in the chat box as well once we get started. For those of you who have just joined us, you are in the right place. This is the first class of the PSS Retirement Readiness Base Camp, and we will be getting started promptly at 1 o'clock. Our instructors are all ready and excited to launch this new program, and we're so thrilled that you've joined us. Okay, welcome to those of you who have just come in. You are in the right place. You are in the PSS Retirement Readiness Base Camp. And we will be starting promptly at 1 o'clock because there is a lot of information to share with you today. Okay, I see people are filing in. And it is now 1 o'clock, and we are going to start on the dot. And welcome, everyone. I'm Lori Peterson, and I oversee PSS Life University, and I'm so excited to bring you today to the first class of the PSS Retirement Readiness Base Camp. This is a new program for us. It is something that is going to extend over the course of the next 8 months. And we will be introducing new classes at the rate of about 1 or 2 per month. This first class came with materials that I hope you all received. Each class will come with a workbook. You got a sheet to fill in your balance sheet, your assets, and your deficits. The instructors will be going into that in a little more detail shortly. We also have another class coming up on November 3rd, How Much Do I Need? And November 17th, Living Trusts. I will be taking questions in the Q&A from all of you and then sharing them with the panelists after their presentation. So we have with us first Anthea Perkinson, who is with Monterey Associates and who also participates with us in the Money Made Simple program. And of course, Ron Fatoullah, the attorney with Fatoullah Law. And Ron is also a seasoned LifeU instructor. And we are just so grateful to them for bringing this to us. And so I am now going to turn it over to Anthea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lori. We have a fairly straightforward agenda today. And remember that today we are introducing this program, which has many presentations to follow. So it is a bit of an overview. We're going to talk about what retirement planning is, how to break it down into components, how to get started. We'll speak to some degree on paying for healthcare. It's a big consideration in retirement. Then we'll pivot to how to define well-being in retirement. And then I will hand off the presentation to my colleague, Ron Fatoullah. When we think about retirement, these are the beautiful images we often see on the glossy brochures from the investment companies and the insurance companies. And it conveys this impression that all you do is have fun. in retirement, that it's about fishing and golf and cycling and happy hour with our partner or friends, and that everything is relaxed, happy, and financially secure. But as we contemplate these images, is this realistic? And as we plan for an actual retirement, a real retirement for ourselves, we have to face some questions. For example, am I and my spouse or partner in reasonably good health? And how would this aspect impact our retirement? Will we have sufficient income or assets to spend down once we stop working for a paycheck? Are any of our children or other family members still dependent on us, financially or otherwise? And what will we really do with our time once we stop working? So this whole program is intended to be the preparation to answer these questions, to do them in real time. And I would encourage you to review the workbook that was sent out to you. I'll refer to it a few times during this presentation. So when you talk to a financial planner and ask, well, what is retirement planning? We're going to give you a somewhat detailed answer. First and foremost, it's an exercise in determining how much money you're going to need to support yourself in retirement. What will your lifestyle be in retirement? And in recognition of the fact that that lifestyle is likely to change over time as we all become less active or have health problems in later years. The mechanical aspects of it involve determining whether we have sources of income in retirement, whether this is from retirement accounts, investment account balances, and pension income, for example. Will this adequately cover our spending needs over this period? Now, on top of these questions, we have to assume a certain longevity, like how long are we planning for? How long do I expect to live? What will inflation do to my account balances and my income? And what assumptions can we make about the growth of my invested assets? So, as it says on the slide, it's complicated and it's not a one and done proposition. You don't put together a retirement plan, put it into the desk, pull it out at 65 and say, here we go. It is something that will be revisited and conceived as the years go by. As we break it down, things that we really need to be mindful of are, what are our expenses in retirement? On the left, you see housing, which brings up a whole collection of questions. Do we plan to stay put? Should we downsize? Do we want to downsize? Would we prefer to move to a warmer or cheaper locale? So a lot of questions about where we will physically live once we stop working. Other essentials in our retirement expenses. Food. Now, food can change a bit once you stop working. You've got more time to go to lunch with your spouse, your partner, your friends. So dining out may be a bigger component of your actual food budget. Utilities, medicine, medical care, your car insurance, these are all things we will continue to pay for even when we stop working. Then we have what we dream about, what those pictures are about on the retirement brochures. Lifestyle spends, the money we're going to spend on travel. We finally have the time to see the world. Let's go do it. Golf with our friends, clubs and museum memberships, gifts to kids and grandkids. These are the things we look forward to actually spending money on. Housing is really worth thinking about carefully, talking about with your spouse or partner, and making sure that you are on the same page. Moving is costly and it's hard for most people, and the older you get, the more difficult it becomes. Many people envision moving to be closer to their children, but remember that if kids are not established in their careers, it's very often the case that they need to relocate for a job or to get their children into better schools. So they may not be around once you move near them. The type of home that works for you at age 65 may not work at 80. Are there stairs? Will you be able to continue to get in and out of the tub? You have a big yard that maybe you have the energy to take care of now, but it's going to be a real headache once you can't physically take care of it yourself. Can you afford to hire help? Help you in the house, keep up the yard? And is there help available to hire? One of the things I've noticed among some of my private clients is that Many have weekend homes in the Berkshires or the Poconos or way upstate, and their dream is to retire there. And then we have the question, okay, so you're up there, you need to get to the hospital. Where's the hospital? You're up there, you don't want to mow that big field anymore. Who's there to help you? And so there is a practical element to this. Will you be able to take care of the house? Will it be the right location for you as your needs change over time? Other essential expenses, these are worth considering too. And as I'm looking at this, I hope you'll remember that in the workbook, we have an area for a pretty detailed budget. And so you will see references to food budgets, utilities, medical care, all of this is in there. And these are important because some of these change, as I mentioned, as we retire. Some of them don't. You'll continue to pay for medical care, utilities, transportation, insurance. So some will become larger expenses. For example, your utilities, if you're home all the time, you'll have the heat on or the air conditioning on. Whereas if you go to work, maybe you turn it down. So those might become higher bills. Food, as I mentioned, if you eat out more, this could be part of your entertainment budget. This is how you see friends, but you may end up spending more on food in retirement. Another question, where do pet expenses fall? I would consider these for most people that I talk to essential. And so making sure that this is in your critical budget and covered by your retirement income is quite important. Most people don't want to think of their pets as lifestyle expenses that can be cut back if things get tight. Their family and their care and food is important. Now, what do we assume about future inflation? Well, we're all aware right now that we're in a very unusual period with very, very high inflation, but that high inflation has been around for about 18 months. And obviously the Fed is raising interest rates to try to push that back and get it under control. The long-term average rate of inflation that's used in most projections and financial plans is 3%. Does that apply to every category of spending? No, and most people will recognize that health insurance and medical care expenses have a higher rate of inflation, probably more around 6% year in, year out. These can be varied in a financial plan, and in that way, you can project what future expenses will be, and we can figure out, will your resources in retirement be able to cover them? Let's look for a moment at lifestyle spending expenses and sort them into two categories because we can think of them fairly differently. On the left, you'll see high cost. These are the things we are dreaming about in our working years, that when we retire and finally have the time, we're going to do that trip of a lifetime. We're going to take that cruise. We're going to just be on the road. Same thing with the golf and the skiing. Well, realistically, by the time we are perhaps in our late 70s, perhaps in our early 80s, the simple challenge of getting through the airport and on an airplane and traveling places starts to lose its appeal. We are not as robust. We do not have quite that stamina to do that. And maybe you take an annual cruise, but the hopping around the world kind of, been there, done that. So as a category of spending, that tends to taper off. Same thing with golf. If you retire at 65, for example, in robust good health, you have many years of golf ahead of you, but there will come a time where you're physically not going to be as able to walk 18 holes, swing like you used to, and probably more out of frustration, you'll likely give it up as a regular hobby. And skiing, I probably don't have to tell you, if you're afraid of falling, skiing becomes pretty unattractive. So these high cost expenses can be set up as goals for just particular periods of time. Maybe it's 10 years, 20 years, but after that, that money that you've been allocating to it can be dedicated to other expenses. On the other hand, things like dining out, entertainment, gifts to children and grandchildren, when we bake that into the budget, the assumption is it stays in the budget because this is what people do and continue to do well into retirement. Now, as we build a financial plan for retirement, trying to really figure out our retirement income plan, we do have to address how long we're planning for. And a lot of people don't like to think about this question because, it brings up mortality. But longevity considerations tell us how many years does the money have to last. And so to answer this question, since there is no certain answer, we think about things like, at what ages did our parents die? What about aunts and uncles? How about siblings? Next, let's meditate on our own lifestyle choices. If we are in good health, take care of ourselves, see the doctor when things are wrong, take the medications that are prescribed to us, that's a plus, likely to live a relatively longer lifespan. If that is not true, and we are somewhat sedentary, maybe a little bit less attentive to diet and things that are not so good for us, maybe that works against us. The current state of health and chronic conditions are inputs into figuring out, am I planning to 92, 95, or 100? Now we're going to talk about the components of the retirement income plan. So the first step after addressing our expenses and figuring out how much it will cost us to live is to figure out, well, where's the income coming from? Number one, do you have any pensions due to you from current or former employers? You may have a pension due to you even from an employer that went out of business. There are ways to find those. Social Security retirement benefits, you can go online to find out what those are, but that's important to know. Those are great benefits, and that income will last for the rest of your life. Social Security is about to announce their cost of living adjustment for next year, and it's estimated to be between 9 and 10%, which is really something. Perhaps you have a trust that provides income to you, or a rental property, or an investment portfolio, taxable investment portfolio that kicks out some dividends and capital gains. Maybe you aspire to continue working part-time, maybe at your current job, or do some freelance work, or change industries altogether. This is very popular. It's become only more so through the pandemic. People like this phased in retirement idea. So you don't go cold turkey one day, you're, sitting there with nothing to do. You have this kind of creating structure, keeping you in touch with the people that you've worked with and have relationships with from many years. Assets that can be converted to income. We have obviously our savings, our taxable investment accounts. We have retirement accounts, whether these are the employer-sponsored 401k or 403b plans or individual retirement accounts. We have real estate, perhaps, and we have maybe a privately owned business. We're anticipating a significant gift or inheritances. Maybe we've got some permanent life insurance that's got some cash value that could be converted to income. We have some annuities. We can talk about that. Art, antiques, valuable collectibles. If these are able to be sold, that could be, these can be assets that can be converted into income. And I list other because I am surprised every so often about a new thing that is deemed an asset. I had a friend tell me the other day that after she retired and closed her business and shut down her website, someone approached her to buy the website domain. And so she got a few $1,000s for this, and it's not something she thought of as an asset, or I did either. But that was a happy surprise. So how do we get started in building a retirement income plan? Well, number one, using your worksheet, we're going to document current living costs, because the best way to predict what we'll be spending in retirement is to see what we're spending now. To do that, you use bank and credit card statements to build out the detailed budget spreadsheet. You want to capture your regular monthly expenses, obviously your essential ones, and also your lifestyle expenses. Then your semi-annual expenses, things that people sort of forget are going to come up. Homeowners insurance, sometimes that's paid twice a year, don't forget it. Property taxes, etc. Annual expenses, everybody gets surprised. The holidays come at the end of the year, we're going to travel, we're going to entertain, buy gifts. These need to be baked in as well. Then we're going to include the cost of debt, and debt is worth its own slide. Dealing with debt as we approach retirement, where we're going to be potentially on a fixed income, we should think about what types of debt make sense to carry into that period of time, that financial situation. Many people have a mortgage, and I know the traditional advice has been to pay it off before you retire. That's not always, it's being rethought and debated, given that interest rates have went down and most people refinanced. It may make sense to keep that mortgage if the rate is low and the payment is modest. Loans, you could have a loan for your car, your boat, personal loan, debt consolidation. These two are payments that you may or may not want to have once you retire. And then we have, of course, credit cards. And credit cards are types of debt that on average, you don't want to take with you into retirement. How do we make these decisions? Well, the first thing to do is to consider how much do these debts really cost? And that is a function of, well, what's the interest rate? What am I actually paying for this financing? As I mentioned, you may have a very modest mortgage. Maybe you have one of those 2.5% mortgages or a 3% mortgage, and you're debating whether to take money out of your investment portfolio to pay it off before you stop working. That might not make sense. But the long-term return on the S&P 500 is 7 to 8%, and your mortgage is only costing you 2.5. You can pay it as a monthly bill, and that's not likely to harm you. Your credit cards, on the other hand, could be a pretty expensive financing proposition. I've seen credit card debts at 28% interest. And the challenge with that is that's expensive. And if you are dedicating limited retirement income to paying these off, I would urge you, or if you're thinking about using limited retirement income to pay these off, do that while you're working. It's better to get in the habit of being in a position to pay them off in full every month and not worry about these financing charges, and have them for an emergency because they can be good in that situation. So next step in putting together a retirement income plan is to track down all of the anticipated sources of income and when they could start. So if you're eligible for a pension, at what year, what age do they begin? And what are your options in terms of how to take them? Do you want a period certain? Do you want to include a spouse or partner? Your pension office, the administrator, will run what's called a hypothetical, give you your various options. They will also tell you whether that pension is subject to what's called a Social Security offset, meaning that, and this is common with government and pensions, they look at what you're going to get from Social Security and they haircut your pension payment. So these things are synced. And so that's a consideration. You don't get 100% of both. Your Social Security retirement benefit, you can look this up on ssa.gov. I will warn you that if you have a credit freeze in place on any of your credit bureau accounts, you will have to lift that in order to access your Social Security account and then reset it. If you have rental income, royalties, business income, you may want to look at a past year tax return to see, well, what is that typically? How much do I think will be there or coming to me in future years? For paychecks from a part-time job, if you're thinking of simply going part-time at your current job, you probably have a pretty good sense of what you could earn for those fewer hours. If you're looking to freelance, you might need to do a little research to figure out how much you might make. And a good place to look for these types of estimates is a website called Upwork, which people post themselves out for hire in various types of freelance work, everything from creative work to financial work. Investment income, again, probably your last year's tax return will give you a sense of whether you get robust dividends and capital gains distributions, and we can project that forward. Annuities, same thing. You can call the customer service number on the statement, and they will run what's called a hypothetical for you and show you what you could take out if you took systematic withdrawals or if you annuitized your contract. Retirement account, RMD withdrawals, the custodian for your retirement accounts has the ability to calculate this for you and give you a range of estimates if you are approaching age 72 when these have to be made. Once you are required to make these types of withdrawals, you will get the actual dollar amount typically on your statement or in email, and they will bug you until you take it in a particular year. We're going to have an entire presentation talking about putting together a retirement income plan, and we will drill even further into this subject and the various types of accounts you'll be including in your plan. So the big question as we put this together, will our sources of income in retirement cover all of our expenses? That's the test. If the answer is yes, you know this for a fact because you've got a pension, you've got savings, you've got retirement accounts, you'll be able to pay your bills in the early years of retirement without having to sell any assets, and you may be able to afford more lifestyle spending. So good for you, you are in relatively good shape. If the answer is no, you don't have a pension, your Social Security income may be limited based on your work history. We're going to be putting together a retirement plan with flexible strategies for taking money out of your various accounts or selling specific assets over time. And I just want to emphasize that this is most people. Really, relatively few Americans are eligible for pensions anymore. It's simply not as popular. They're expensive for companies to maintain, and they have gotten away from them over time. So most of us are putting together our own retirement by saving into our employer retirement savings plans and our IRAs, and that is what we will be using for retirement. And we'll talk about how we do that in our next presentation. Paying for healthcare. Want to make a quick plug for health savings accounts. If you haven't heard of these, it's like having an IRA for medical expenses. These are you save pre-tax, meaning it reduces your current taxable income, and then you can spend tax-free on eligible medical expenses. You must be in a high deductible in health insurance plan. If you're with New York State's Marketplace, New York State of Health, the bronze plan qualifies. You can only contribute to a health savings account up until age 64 and a half. Once you reach age 65 and you're eligible for Medicare, you cannot contribute any longer. But at age 65, there's an expanded list of things that you can use this money to pay for. What's good about these, if you're a single person, you can put away this year $3,650. If you are a family, you and one other person constitutes family, you can put away $7,300. If you're over age 55, you can put another $1,000 in. Reduces your income, your taxable income now, gives you pre-tax money. You can invest it, it could grow. And obviously, as we're older, we spend more on medical costs, and this is a good thing to have. Very briefly on Medicare, just want to alert you to this big decision that you'll need to make as you prepare for retirement, or maybe in the years before. We all have to sign up for Medicare Part A at age 65. If you're working for a company, somebody from HR is going to reach out, no doubt, and tell you, don't forget to do this. You have a window to sign up 3 months prior to your birthday, the month of your birthday, and 3 months after. If you miss this window thinking, yeah, I've got insurance, I'm fine, my employer's covering this, you will then pay a premium penalty when you finally do sign up. You can keep your employer insurance, but what happens at age 65 is that Medicare becomes your base insurance and your employer's insurance is the supplemental. So Medicare covers your hospitalization and doctors, or actually just the hospitalization, and your employer covers the other two pieces. So we will have a Medicare expert giving an entire presentation on this in the spring, and I would encourage you to attend. What I will say as a financial planner, age 63. Age 63 is the income measuring year for what your premium is going to be for Medicare. It's a 2-year look back. This is always true. If you can avoid doing a giant Roth conversion at age 63 or selling your business, it will simplify your life. Obviously, how much money you earn, your adjusted gross income, is of interest to Medicare. If you earn as a single person $91,000 or less, your monthly premium is $170.10 this year. It's going down by $5 next year. If you're married, it's twice that amount. If you earn $1 more than $191,000, it goes up to $238.10 every month for the year. So you can see how having a lot of income could make the same insurance coverage more costly. And this is, twice the impact if you happen to be part of a married couple filing jointly. So there is a way to appeal a Medicare premium amount if you had a one-time event that caused your income to spike. It's a process, but it is possible to do. Paying for healthcare, a brief word here on long-term care insurance. Again, we'll have an expert come and really dig into this. It can be very helpful in terms of providing the means to cover in-home care, whether that's at home or at an assisted living facility, graduated care, or a nursing home. Traditional policies are sold between 52 and 64. They do not sell them out after age 65 in New York. Premiums have increased dramatically. This is what we all read about in the press, and policy owners have been forced to reduce benefits or cancel. To address these challenges with traditional policies, there are now life insurance contracts that you can purchase that have long-term care riders. And what's nice about this, if you end up not using it, the proceeds go tax-free to your beneficiaries. If you do need it, well, you have it. You've effectively prepaid for some element of long-term care coverage. Same thing exists for annuities. With the annuity, it too has a long-term care rider. If you needed the annuity for income, you can tap it. But if you don't, and you don't end up using the long-term care rider, that too goes to your beneficiary. So how to define well-being in retirement? As we prepare for this next phase in our lives, we are looking to ensure our financial security. We want to enjoy reasonable good health. We will assume that that will be the case and care for ourselves. We want to make sure we've got in place adequate levels of care and assistance, as we need more care and assistance over time. And we want to do some contingency planning. And with that, I'm going to say that this includes what my colleague, Ron Fatoullah, will cover. So I will let him dig into these particular topics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthea. That was absolutely terrific. And I just want to remind everyone, this is the first class. It's like a muscle. We're going to be building that muscle over the course of the next 8 months or so. And so we have to start at a base, and that was just a terrific way to start off. So I have slides as well, so let me bring those up. So again, my name is Ron Fatoullah. I'm an elder law and estate planning attorney. Here's my contact information. So as Anthea said, I'm going to be tackling this not so much on the financial planning end, although it just dovetails. It all goes and works together. But I'm going to talk about the team that you need to assemble, and it does include the elder law and estate planning attorney and the financial advisor and some of these other experts that Anthea spoke about, such as someone that does Medicare to help you with that end of things, maybe a Social Security expert. I look at it, I don't know, Anthea, how you see it, but I look at it as the elder law and estate planning attorney and the financial advisors. We're the quarterbacks, and we could help you bring in anyone else that you might need. Today, I'm going to be talking about your last will and testament, your special planning power of attorney, healthcare proxies, living wills. going to just touch upon trust, but we have a whole section on trusts in November that we're going to dig in deep, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about how long will your documents be current and who pays for long-term care. I will just be touching upon that. Talking about assembling your team. Again, it's the attorney for estate planning, estate tax planning, making sure you have your documents in place. How are you going to pay for long-term care? It might involve Medicaid planning and planning for any sort of incapacity. Of course, you have the financial advisor. You heard Anthea today talking about investments, how much income you need, assets, etc. And she discussed projections. But one thing, and I have it highlighted here, once we do that elder law plan, the Medicaid plan, the estate planning plan, you might have a trust. That trust has to be managed. The assets in that trust have to be managed in a very, very precise way. You need somebody who's going to manage it right. So the financial advisor will make sure, for example, in our Medicaid trust, that principal does not go back to the creator of that trust. That could taint the trust. And we see that problem, I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a month as clients come in from seeing other attorneys and say, well, how come my assets are available for Medicaid? Because the financial advisor might have distributed assets the wrong way. So you really need a professional. I don't think you should do it yourself. And you need somebody that knows what they're doing. So I'm so glad that I'm partnering with Anthea and PSS Circle of Care for these seminars. Of course, you need the CPA for tax planning, preparation, financial record keeping. That's essential. But if you need a higher level of care, we may need you to have a geriatric care manager, maybe somebody to come in, coordinate, maybe make some modifications to your living space. I know Anthea mentioned you might have a second home, let's say in the Berkshires, and maybe that was great 10 years ago, but you now need grab bars in the bathroom, etc. Well, you may need somebody to come in and do an assessment and make sure that you're safe, your home is safe, and you're getting the care that you need. Okay, so now let me delve into some of the most important documents that everyone should have. Number one, your last will and testament. Where are your assets going to go when you pass away? Absolutely crucial. Everyone should have a will. Number two, not just a power of attorney, but a special planning, elder care and estate planning power of attorney. It's an expanded power that will let your agent do last-minute planning, Medicaid planning, estate planning, etc. So that's essential. Healthcare proxy, last will and testament, you definitely want to have a good elder law and estate planning attorney do. The power of attorney, ditto. You really do need a good attorney to make sure that it's structured the right way. I cannot tell you how many times client comes in, says, thank God we have a power of attorney for mom, everything is set. But look at the power and they don't have any extra provisions and we have to go in for a guardianship action. I don't want that to happen to you. Moving on to the healthcare proxy, that, however, is a document you could do on your own, and I'm happy to go over that with you today. A living will is a document in which you set forth what your healthcare wishes are. So don't mix up your living will with your last will and testament. That document is where your assets go. Living will, what are your healthcare wishes? And last but not least, a trust, typically a living trust. So we're going to have a whole section on that. I'm just going to spend a minute on a living trust later on, just so you could put in your brains where the trust fits in with the other documents. So, with regard to your last will and testament, it's important that everyone has a will, and your attorney should draft that. Again, the will sets forth where your assets go when you pass away. Now, who will your beneficiaries be? Well, they could be individuals, they could be your family, could be friends, it could be a charity. And many people don't realize that in your will, you could actually create a trust. A trust within your will is called a testamentary trust. And many times, that's a strategy that we use for Medicaid planning, sometimes estate tax planning, etc. So those testamentary trusts could be very, very important, sometimes just as important as living trusts. But again, your beneficiary could be a trust that we draft. When we draft that will, the trust is in that will, and that is another beneficiary that you could name. So who are the parties to a last will and testament? We have the creator of that will. Whose will is it? We call that individual the testator. Now, within that will, the testator, the creator of the will, appoints an executor, an individual to manage the assets, bring that will into the surrogate's court, manage the assets. Of course, you have the attorney, the elder law attorney to oversee everything and to handle this, but the executor is nominated to invest the assets. My advice, yes, it be in charge to invest the assets, but have a good financial planner to do it and stay on top of it. But anyway, you have the executor to manage the assets, gather the assets, and ultimately, with court supervision, to distribute the assets to the beneficiaries. And again, a beneficiary could be that trust within the will. Now, look at that last bullet point. So many times I see a client come into my office and say, oh, for my will, well, I don't know what I want to do. And sometimes, and I don't want this to happen, but sometimes clients insist to bring a child into the consultation, and I definitely frown on this, but sometimes they look at their son or daughter and say, I don't know, what do you think I should do? Who do you think? And I don't like that. And it's at that point that I would ask that son or daughter to step out. But so many individuals are influenced by family members or friends or someone else to do something with their assets later on. And I want my clients to make sure, and I want you to make sure that your assets go to whom you want your assets to go to. And that's something that we can also flesh out, or any elder law and estate planning attorney could flesh out during the consultation. That's what that consultation is for, not to have somebody else influence you. Okay, first bullet point, very important. I'm sure that 90% of you know. I want to make sure that 100% of you know. If there's a discrepancy or a conflict between your will, the beneficiary in your will, or a beneficiary designation on a bank account, a brokerage account, or life insurance, or anything else, what controls? Well, very clearly, the beneficiary designation on the account controls. Example, you have a will that says, I give all my assets to my 2 children equally. But you have a beneficiary designation on a bank account that says, well, this bank account goes to, upon my death, goes to my brother or sister. Well, that beneficiary designation will control. So I want you to be clear on that. Now, who gets your assets if there is no will? There is a law. It's in the Estates, Powers, and Trust Law, section 4-1.1A, which basically sets forth, if you have no will, your assets go to certain individuals. It's where New York State basically guesses where an average person's or what your average person's beneficiaries or who they will be. But I would say, don't let New York State, in essence, write your will, write it yourself, and make sure that you have a will. But for example, if you don't have a will or beneficiary designations, and you have a spouse with no children, all assets go to the spouse. If you have no spouse and children, they go to your children. If you have no spouse, no children, go to parents. With no parents, it goes to siblings, etc. But that might not be what you want. So you make sure you have your own will. Who can contest your will? Anyone that could get if there were no will. And you need to know that you could cut out anyone that you want in your will, even a spouse. However, that spouse does have a right of election, which says that if that spouse doesn't get the greater of 1/3 of your estate, or $50,000, whichever is greater, typically 1/3, then that spouse has a right to go into the surrogate's court, not to prove that they need those assets or don't need them. They just have to prove that they were married at the time of death. And then they have a right. It's called a right of election. They have the right to get 1/3 of your estate. Now, typically, when an individual or a married couple signs a prenup agreement or a postnup, it does include a waiver of this right of election. And if you think that where there might be a will contest, try to avoid the will contest. So let's talk about grounds to contest. Well, you don't sign the will right, lack of proper execution. And you should know that if a licensed attorney supervises the will, there's a presumption that that will was signed the right way. That is crucial. That is crucial. The only time that we had a situation where we had to spend so much money to make sure that the will was good was when a client, unfortunately not a client at the time the will was done, the individual downloaded a will from one of these companies. And of course, there are almost always problems with this. And there was a problem with the way the will was executed. You didn't get that presumption. And it was crazy, but there were about $80,000 of unnecessary legal fees because they didn't want to hire a lawyer for the will, just pretty nutty. But anyway, you want to make sure that the will is signed right. You do want to have the supervision of a licensed attorney. You'll get the presumption of due execution of that will. If the testator doesn't have capacity, then you could contest the will. If it wasn't executed properly, you could contest the will. If you feel that that will was revoked, or there was fraud, or undue influence, or duress, or forgery, somebody signed the individual's name and it wasn't the individual, that these are all grounds to contest. Undue influence means, for example, like a child saying, and we've seen this so many times, and it's awful, but where a child might say, for example, Mom, I know, you have a son in California, you have a daughter in Florida, I'm here in New York, I'm going to take care of you, but I'm spending all this time. And if you want me to keep doing this, then you have to give me 90% of your assets. I'll take you to a lawyer. Now, you might be smiling. I'm not smiling because I see that often. Make sure that there's no undue influence or duress. Not everybody could contest. And look at the last note. You have to be a distributee, someone who would get if there were no will, because if the will wasn't good, then they would have gotten. So a distributee, or if you have a pecuniary interest, you would have gotten if this will, was no good. So then you could bring that up and contest. So you want to reduce the chances of a will contest, and many ways to do it. Execute it right. You could put a provision in the will or trust. It's a no contest clause. When I talk about trust, I'm going to get into this. Make sure that, in a sense, you could prove your competency and talk to individuals and make sure you have good witnesses. The attorney will take care of that upon the signing. Best idea is to have a trust so you don't have to worry about these issues. And you could always do will stacking, is where you have multiple wills, generally the same intent. Each will is a little different, but in order for someone to really contest, they would have to go and contest all these wills with different witnesses. And contesting a will really does take quite a bit. There hasn't been one will which was successfully a challenge that we did in the lifespan of my law firm, which is, it's been 40 years already. Next document, the expanded power of attorney. So whereas the will set forth where your assets go when you pass away, it's the power of attorney is where you give the right to another individual or individuals the right to handle your finances. That's not enough. As you age, you need a special type of power. I call it a special expanded elder care and planning power of attorney, where the attorney might add an extra 20 or 30 extra provisions to make sure that you can do Medicaid planning, protect assets, create trusts, modify trust, revoke trust, eliminate estate taxes, reduce estate taxes, take elections, disclaim assets, protect your family home. Making gifts is part of it. There are so many extra provisions that we would add to that power of attorney. Don't fall short and download a power of attorney. There is a New York State statutory power, and it's okay to have, but that has to be expanded if you want protection as you age. You can name more than one agent on that power of attorney. You could name your son and your daughter, or your two sons and your daughters, or anybody else. You could say they can act together or separately or successively. Child A first, child B second, or child C third. The provisions that the elder law attorney drafts are just so key. We have a new power of attorney law that's been in effect for a little more than a year. There are a lot of reasons that this law had to come about, but these are some of the keys. No more statutory gifts rider. You have the ability to make gifts, but all of those extra provisions that we had now have to go into the body of that power of attorney, which is why we have more than 20, 25 provisions now, because we don't have that extra rider. So it's fine, things are good. We just have to make sure we have all of those salient provisions that were in the statutory gifts rider to go into the body and the modification sections of that power of attorney. Now, the way the power of attorney must be signed has changed. Now we need the individual, the principal, to sign in front of two witnesses and a notary, and one of the witnesses can act as a notary. And this, although some people might say it's a little more cumbersome, I love it, because now our power in New York conforms with other states like Florida, and our power in New York is typically good. Another great thing in our power of attorney, we have acceptance and reliance. Before a year ago, Some banks, some brokerage houses did not accept the power. Now, if they don't accept it and don't abide, you're able to get these slides and keep them. Just look at this page and use it as a reference. If the bank, the brokerage house, or even a third party, they refuse to accept the power, they have to do it in writing. Then there's a 10-day period to honor or reject the power. If it's rejected, then you could respond as to why they should accept it. And then they have 7 days to accept or reject. But if they reject again, if they lose that case, they could be sued. And there's a lot of liability on, that the banks or brokerage houses or any individual has if they don't accept a good power of attorney. Next document, I'm going to be done in just a couple of minutes, is the healthcare proxy. Healthcare proxy is statutory. You could do this one on your own, whereas I think it's crazy for you to do your last will and testament and the planning power of attorney on your own. It's complicated, should be done with an attorney. Healthcare proxy is simple. You could download that form on the Department of Health website in New York, and that healthcare proxy only comes into effect when you can't make your own healthcare decisions. The power of attorney is where you name someone else to make your decisions. Unlike the power of attorney where you could name multiple people, on that healthcare proxy, you could only name one individual at a time, but you could say child A can't act, then child B, then child C, or friend, or whoever. You need 2 witnesses. Witness should not be anyone who's an agent on that proxy. You don't need a notice. You don't need a notary. And there's no notices at all to be filed, and you don't file that healthcare proxy, but make sure you keep that on your possession. A living will works with the healthcare proxy. A living will, not your last will and testament, sets forth what your healthcare wishes are, not like in your last will and testament, where your assets go when you pass away. So in your living will, you might say, I don't want to be kept alive artificially if there's no chance of recovery. Living will is a proper form. If, God forbid, you're dealing with someone who doesn't have a healthcare proxy, doesn't have a living will, we do have something in New York State called the Family Healthcare Decisions Act, and it enables family members, there's a hierarchy, family members, even a close friend, to make healthcare decisions for the individual if they're in a facility or at home on hospice. Okay. We're going to have a whole section on living trust. We're going to get to that in a couple of weeks or in November. That should be a lot of fun. And and I could do this next time when I talk about living trust and getting this all together. But you want to keep your documents current, but these documents don't have an expiration date on them. It's not like a carton of milk. The will is good, even if it's 10 years old, 15 years old. But I discourage you to have a really old will where the surrogate might say it's an ancient document, so-called ancient document. But we'll get into this later on when we focus on that last document, which we're going to go into in depth, the living trust. And we have a whole nother section on paying for long-term care and Medicaid planning. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and let's see if we have any Q&As, questions and answers. Maybe we'll have some answers to the questions.
There are some questions that have come in during the session, and I'm going to go from reverse backwards. If a will is written in one state and you move to another in retirement, is there anything you need to do to keep it valid?
Well, that's a very simple answer. Any will done in one state is good in any other sister state. So if the will is done properly in Alaska, and it was done right in Alaska, we could actually probate that in New York. The big issue that people have is that the wills are old and it doesn't say what they really want. So just make sure that the will says exactly what you'll want. It will be good in any sister state.
Okay. Are all Medicaid asset protection trusts irrevocable? Is there a way to protect your assets from Medicaid through a revocable trust? And if so, how?
Okay, I'm going to answer this. It's going to sound like a very strange answer. The Medicaid asset protection trusts are irrevocable. However, you could revoke that irrevocable trust. And it's pretty simple the way we draft our irrevocable trust. So it is irrevocable. It can be revoked with the consent of the individual that created the trust, likely you, the trustee who you handpick and could even change, and the beneficiaries. And that's not going to be an issue with the way we draft our trust. They're irrevocable, but you can revoke it.
Okay, and finally, what if one is over 64 and a half, but not on Medicare, still working full-time, but with a high deductible health insurance plan? Is there no possibility to get an HSA, health savings account?
You are no longer at that age. Once you are at or past age 64 and a half, you're no longer eligible to contribute to an HSA. And there are penalties for doing so.
Okay, what is the purpose of estate planning, and is there a fixed amount of money required?
The purpose of an estate plan is it's part of Medicaid planning in case you don't have the long-term care insurance or can't afford it. It's reducing or eliminating estate taxes if you have a larger estate. It's planning for if you have a disabled child or a spendthrift child. There's so many different reasons to plan your estate. And it should be done at any age. You could have $100,000 and you should do some sort of estate plan typically, or you could have 100 million and then you want to reduce estate taxes.
Okay, what should one think about in terms of all the legal documents you just discussed if one either moves to another country or lives abroad part of each year?
Yes, you would want to see local counsel abroad. Typically, the US will have treaties with that other country, and it would be a combination of having the right documents here, having the right documents there, and making sure, and typically you're not going to be taxed twice. Your estate, for example, if you have a larger estate, won't be taxed in both countries, but we got to look at the treaty with that other country.
Okay. I am putting a question into the chat. What can we do better next time? Did this meet your expectations? And any feedback that you can give us will be of great value as we continue to roll out these courses over the next 8 months. A reminder that there is another class coming up on November 3rd, How Much Do You Need? And on November 17th, Ron will be doing a deep dive into living trusts. And you can register for both of those if you go to pssusa.org/retire-ready. We will be making the recording available, and if the professors are amenable, some version of the slides will be made available as well.
Perfectly fine.
Okay, are there any other questions before we go? I want to thank you on behalf of PSS and PSS Life University, Anthea and Ron, and I want to thank all of you who attended and gave your attention and stayed with us through the entire hour. Once again, if you did not receive the worksheet, check your junk mail or put your email. A couple of you put your email address into the Q&A, so those will be sent right out to you after the session. And we'll see you on November 3rd.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, have a great day. Enjoy the sun.